in now too, so that's thank you, Cyrus. Yes, so this just for those joining now, this session will be recorded. I hope you're okay with that, just so you're aware. So welcome. This is the session from the Fair Data Maturity Model Working Group of the Research Data Alliance, and the session today is going to focus on learning from adoption. And one of the questions that has come up recently is the governance of a fair assessment tool, and how does that fit with interpreting the fair assessment tool and using the fair assessment tool in practice. So we want to spend a bit of time looking at that aspect too. And we're very happy to have Romain David and Marie, who are both on the article that wrote about that. So we'll come to that later. But first of all, we'd like to, here we are. And this is our agenda for today. So before we kick off, my name is Keith Russell. I am Director Outreach at the Australian Research Data Commons, living in Australia, which means it's a terrible time for me. So please bear with me. It's midnight for me. So I'm trying to stay awake as we go through this. I'm joined here by my colleague, Shelley Stall. She's one of the other co-chairs of this, this working group. And Shelley, I guess it's a better time for you?
It is. It is 10 a.m.
Yeah,
it's fine. So no complaints on my side.
So I'm really grateful that Shelley's here, because she can lead the discussion in a much more inspiring way than I can at this time of day. So our agenda for today is, first of all, I'll do a very brief spiel just on what is the Fair Data Maturity Model and where have we got to. Then I would like to focus on adopting the Fair Data Maturity Model in practice. And we're very grateful to have Carlo with us. And Carlo will be speaking about an instance where they have adopted the Fair Data Maturity Model, and we'll be very interested to hear the lessons learned from that. Then after that, we'd like to spend a bit of time talking about the governance of fair assessment and have a bit of discussion around fair adoption and the governance of fair assessment. So that's our agenda for today. So here we go. First of all, I'll give just a brief intro on the model, some of the history. So what happened? This is years back. The fair data principles were drafted, were out there, and a number of assessments were being developed around the globe. And what you saw is that the principles, because they were formulated at the principles level, there was a lot of ambiguity and a wide range of interpretations. So there were also a wide range of assessment frameworks that came up. So what we tried to do with this work is to bring together stakeholders that have an interest in fair assessment and build on those existing approaches to come up with a set of core assessment criteria for fairness. So that was really the aim of this working group. We were clearly not intending to come up with yet another evaluation method, but rather to bring together across those assessments that existed. And we also did not want to revise and redesign the FAIR principles, really just sticking with the original principles. So we were established back in 2019, 5 years ago already now. I'm starting to feel old. I did an initial landscaping report and came up with a first draft of the model. We tested that out and did a lot of community consultation in actually coming up with what that model should look like and what the indicators should be that should be used for fair assessment. And then we published the version of the model, and the working group went into maintenance mode. And we've been in maintenance mode since then. And we spend time looking at the fair assessment and the adoption of fair assessment and what can we learn from that. So the model's out there. It's on Zenodo. It's a list of indicators, and there's also an Excel sheet. You can try and use it, and you can get some nice bar graphs or spider graphs to give you a bit of a sense where you're at and how you'd score yourself for fair assessment. So that's my brief intro. If you're interested, please join us. Please become a member of the group. And here you have some links to the mailing list, GitHub, and Zenodo, and the article about the whole process. So that was the background. That was the starting point. And what we've seen since then is that there's been a number of adoptions, actually more adoptions than we initially found. It's quite hard to track all the adoptions happening around the globe of the Fair Data Maturity Model, but we are very happy to hear that, that Carlo and his group have used the Fair Data Maturity Model to assess the fairness of virtual atomic and, to do an assessment of the fairness of the virtual atomic and molecular data center. So there you go. So thank you very much, Carlo, for being available to speak. And we're very interested in your story and what it has meant for you. So I will stop sharing and then I will hand over to Carlo and then he can present their lessons learned.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good night, good evening. I don't know where you are. Can you see my screen? Full screen mode. Okay, perfect. So as introduced, thank you for the introduction. I'm going to describe the assessment of the VAMDC infrastructure. VAMDC is for Virtual Atomic and Molecular Data Center, which is a worldwide research infrastructure which federates in an interoperable way more than 40 heterogeneous atomic and molecular databases, which are accessible through a common portal and through common tools. But it's also a consortium of 25 partners. And the real, the quality of the data is one of the key success of VAMDC. There are a lot of applications linked with the data which are distributed by this infrastructure, mainly for astrophysics and plasma science. But we also have health and clinical application, fusion technology, atmospheric physics, and lightning technologies. One of the main goal of VAMDC is to provide the data producer and user with a large dissemination platform for their work. So here I link a paper which describes, we celebrate the first decade of VAMDC. It's a paper from 2020 and it describes all these aspects. From the technical point of view, as I said, there are autonomous databases which are wrapped with a specific piece of software. We call this the node software. And with this wrapping, all these existing databases accept queries submitted in a standard grammar and produce standardized outputs. So the interoperable aspects are both for the query and for the results. All the details for these standards implemented and adopted are at this page. And the produced output is XAMSS, which is XML schema for molecules and atoms. And you see there is a tree hierarchy of information. And this schema has been defined here in Paris Observatory, where I am at NIST and the International Atomic Agency. So we have this data node, or we have a lot of data nodes, as I said before, 40, and all these resources are registered into public registry. Into this registry, we may write the unique identifier for the resources, the capabilities of these databases, the version of the standard, and the contact person to, if we have a scientific question or if we have to ask for maintenance. We have another element, which is the species database, which is a central repository for all the chemical information harvested from the existing nodes. So chemical information are the name of the species, the stoichiometric and structural formula, INCHI and INCHI key, which are the international identifier of the chemical global union, the mass number, and the charge for electric charged species. We have client software. I give you the example of some client we've implemented. And the species database is used for auto-completion of client information. So when a user submits a query through a client, the client discusses with the registry to see what are the available resources. The query is dispatched to all the nodes. The results are gathered to the user, but also all these actions are stored. So the nodes which are producing the data discuss with another central service, which is the query store, which is in the implementation of the RDA data citation recommendation. So we store the detail for all the queries. So we have the information with a DOI and PID for each query. So we are able to cite our data with according to this data citation recommendation. We have access to the version of each element of this infrastructure. We are able to replay as long as we want the original query and the produced result. We have a list of publications needed to compute the results. So we have the bibliographic references, and we have direct access to the produced output. And when the DOI is cited, all the producers receive credits because also we implement this colleagues recommendation. So for cross-linking. So if somebody use a data extracted from MDC, can use the DOI. So the data producer will receive bibliographic credits when the data is cited. So if we see all these picture, we see that the infrastructure, which has been designed since 2009, has a good level of fairness because data are easy to discover and to find with the portal, with the registry. Everything is accessible, interoperable, easy to reuse. So we can say we are fair ante litteram. And then we discovered the RDA assessment framework. So I recall briefly here, we have 40 indicators, 7 for findable, 12 for accessible and interoperable, 10 for reusable. And each indicator has a priority which determines its importance. We have essential, important, and useful. And the level of maturity is an integer which goes through 0 for not applicable, to 4 for fully implemented. So all these family of criteria and maturity level. So we decided to go through all these criteria to assess the fairness of MDC. And to be completely honest, my a priori thought was we are already fair. What are we going to learn with this exercise? And it's just maybe a technocratic document. It's not relevant for our SANS platform. But actually, it was really useful and we learned a lot. So here I present an overview of the result. We see that the situation is really good for findable and for accessible. It is not really the case for interoperable. And it is mainly linked with the fact that we not systematically use FAIR dictionaries. We use a knowledge representation, which is not from FAIR dictionary. And the situation is even worse for reusable. But actually, it's more linked with legal aspects and licensing aspects. It's not a problem linked with technical or reusability or lacking of description of our data. So practically, if I take all the 4 pillars of the MDC infrastructure, so the data nodes, the registry, the query store, and the species database, we saw that we have to better integrate these 2 elements because the information is split on 2 parts, and we need a single entry point for all the information about our data nodes. So it's an ongoing work. We are making a new Python library so that we can integrate it into computational notebook. And in this new library, everything is really linked. We glue these 2 aspects, and the user will see just one interface without having to cope with these 2 elements, which are the species database and the registries. Also, we have to introduce a PID to cite 2 different elements which lives in different pillar component. For example, when in the registry we refer to a species, we should use a PID rather than a simple text string. This is really something which may be useful, and we are in this process of renaming our identifier. As I said, there is a lack of licensing because we have we don't have a unique condition of usage and privacy rule for all VAMDC information and for the usage of our services. We have also to register our standard into registry of type like fair sharing, and also use a systematically fair dictionary while we describe controlled representation of knowledge in our standards. Also, we have to better describe our API. Our API are not defined in an interoperable way. They are machine actionable. Sorry, they are machine understandable, but not machine actionable. So we have to introduce standard for information from the species database and the query store, and also describe those interfaces in a standard way, which is understandable both for human and machine. As I said before, we have to introduce systematically fair dictionaries, and this is an ongoing process. We are collaborating on this semantics aspect with the Fair Impact project, and we are migrating all the VAMDC dictionary onto Portal. And also we should better introduce provenance information in our data pipeline. To conclude, the fairness of VAMDC is satisfying for people aware of the infrastructure subtleties, but may be improved for newcomers and or for transdisciplinary activities. The main lines of improvement may be summarized as follows. Provide a single entry point for all the information about a given node. Try to cross-references metadata between the different pillars using PAD, and register our standard into registry of type, and adopting systematically fair dictionary to express knowledge. The main obstacle that explain the unsatisfactory evaluation for the reusable principle are related to the absence of a license policy and non-adoption of standard representation for provenance information. But we are a worldwide infrastructure, and it's very hard to define licensing in an international, in other words, a multi-juridical framework, because the right of data is not the same in US and in Europe, and there is not the same rules for database protection, etc. So it's really hard to define something which may fit all the people. So scientists are okay. They say, okay, use a CC BY, but our institute, which have to validate the chosen license, go back to their national juridical framework, so they cannot agree on something which is final acceptable for everybody. For the provenance information, we look at the W3C provenance, or IVOA, which is a W3C derivative of a provenance representation system, and we saw it's really difficult to handle for a user. And for most of our users, a README files is useful. So we are providing this provenance information just as a text information. Something which I want to highlight about this process is that the analysis was really useful, and the RDA Fair Data Maturity Model, I guess it was mainly designed for standalone data sets or repository, actually perfectly scales in the case of a distributed and complex infrastructure as VAMDC. The methodology pays great attention to the distinction between data and metadata. When you go through the criteria, everywhere there is, this is data, this is metadata. And from my point of view, it's really an arbitrary distinction. Reality is more complex because my metadata may be your data. So for making our exercise of assessment, we have to make an arbitrary choice. And the validity of all I told you before relies on this choice. And this choice is quite strong, is that all the information from the data nodes is data, because it's scientific data. All the other information, which is in the registry, in the species database, and in the query store, is metadata, because it's something which refine the information, the basic scientific information, which is from the node. This is really something arbitrary. I think if you put the limit somewhere else, the analysis may be different. But we have to choose a framework. So this is our framework. And also I think that the adopters may need some exegesis to adapt the criteria and understand it to their specific use case. I thank again the co-chairs, because I asked several questions about how to interpret things, because it was not really clear. We have the semantic is the same, but we can interpret it in different ways. Also, I think that adopters need a clear guidance between all the available evaluation frameworks. There are other, which are the FAIR one, the FAIR sharing, and I put as a reference to a comparison here, which is an Excel file on Zenodo. And from what I saw, the RDA Fair Data Maturity Model is the more complete, and it mapped quite well on the other ones. So I think it was a good choice, but other things exist in the nature. Other people may use different framework. So how do we cross-match our analysis made with this different frameworks? I think this is important. And also the reusable criteria mostly relies on licensing and legal aspect. And this was really frustrating for our data producers, because they paid great effort to obtain scientific, technical, and practical reusability, because they describe their data, they paid attention to quality, etc., to give all the production framework, and they received a bad evaluation just for legal aspects, which are really perceived far from science. So they were quite unhappy and say, we are not reusable. Actually, from their perspective, they are really reusable. They are making this kind of data sharing from the 60s for some of our members. So they think they are the experts of data sharing and reusability. So it's something we have to take into account when we give back the results. To conclude, you can go deeper. Here is the paper with the fine-grained evaluation of all the criterion. A free version is available here. So you on Zenodo, or just by flashing this QR code. And this slide I just presented are available with this tiny URL or this QR code. And I'm happy to answer to all your questions.
Thank you, Carlo. That was, wow, that was very impressive. You applied it to a very large infrastructure and a very large pipeline in that infrastructure. That was, yes, a very thorough use of the Fair Data Maturity Model, and some really interesting perspectives there. So thank you very much. First of all, does anybody have any questions to Carlo?
There are a couple of comments that were in the chat. Roman pointed out that limit between determining metadata and data as being critical. Roman, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
That was something that I've seen during the Fair Data Maturity Model also, because I was in charge of 4 case studies on the 13 ones, and in different communities, we have sometimes the same data or same metadata, but at different level. So indeed, at the end, we not obtain the same notes and the same score. And it depends also on the semantic and how you apply, because you can sometimes be online with the criteria, be always online, you know how to do, but you don't do, or it is automatical and it is always done. And all these levels are not interpreted at the same level. And I will also talk about that with the paper, but there is also the level of mandatory, useful, and I don't know, it's desirable and optional, perhaps. I always mix different levels, but all these levels don't have the same meaning and the same importance between communities. And that's also something that we will have to take care and to take in account in governance model for the future.
Yes, thanks, Connor. I think Carlos just jumped back to the importance. Yes, the importance there, and you can see that for each indicator, it's either useful or important or essential. Those are the three levels that we used in the priority scale. Thanks, Carlo. Nick has raised his hand. Nick, would you like to speak?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having trouble unmuting. I think I'm probably just going to echo what Romain said. We did an evaluation using these RDA indicators a couple of years ago in one of the projects I was involved in, and to try and make it kind of fair, we had 3 independent evaluations, three different people using the same indicators. And actually, we came up with very different answers. Each person came up with a different set of answers because it's subjective. The interpretation becomes subjective. And the only way we could come with arrive at a final score was to discuss each of the differences. So I completely understand your point there. And I was just wondering how you did it yourselves. Did you have different evaluators and then discuss, or was there one person ultimately responsible for deciding what the interpretation of each indicator was?
The person who made the analysis was me, because all the others said, no way, you're crazy. We won't go through the 40 criteria by hand with all this complex infrastructure. So it's a job I made alone during the summer 2022, I guess. And this is why I wrote the paper, because I thought it was important to share the way I consider the criteria. So if you go to the paper, which is linked at the end, you will see there is a discussion about all the evaluation. I say I put 4 here because that reason and that reason, and so you can see what was my interpretation for the criteria itself and for the maturity level I assessed. And also the paper was reviewed by 2 reviewers, which was, I guess, really aware of all these fair aspects and these infrastructure aspect. And they were quite happy with the criteria. With my evaluation, they asked to change just 1 or 2 over 40 because they were not agree. They put 4, they say it's 3.
Yeah. So there was disagreement between your interpretation and the reviewer's interpretation as well.
Yes, but it was really about 1 unit over 2 criteria.
Yeah. And for the reusability aspect of the indicators, I think again, I think this is the hardest one, because to future-proof, because typically I work with data sets in the life science domain, to future-proof and predict the reusability use cases in the future is very hard. So to kind of incorporate that metadata or whichever kind of metadata related properties you need to include in advance of needing them is very hard. So reusability for me is always the hardest of the indicators to comply with. And license as well. I think that's an issue, but I would have thought that just the provision of a license should match the FAIR principles, right? You need to have how that's taken afterwards. I think the important part is to have the license. After that, people can debate in their own jurisdictions whether it's appropriate to use license X or whether you can do some mapping to the most locally relevant license in that jurisdiction. But I don't know about, there's probably legal complications as well, like you said.
I know the rules. I don't know if there is still a RDA group on legal interoperability.
Yeah.
It was on this aspect, but I'm not sure about I did not follow really that group recently, so I don't know if it's still existing and what they produced.
Anyway, thank you for the talk.
Thank you. I think Gerhard has also got his hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I already put the comment in here about the FAIR dictionary. It was really interesting for us. I mean, I'm one of the co-chairs of this new working group on harmonized terminologies and schema for the field of material science and chemistry FAIR data. And in our case statement, we indicated the lack of FAIR vocabularies in the field as one of the reasons why we need to have this group. So it's also interesting that you found that an issue. But yeah, I had just a very small detailed question also. You said you are now using a certain dictionary or developing, so I missed that a little bit in your talk.
Yeah,
that detail.
We have dictionaries which are mainly used by humans. So it is a web page with all the terms and their meaning. So this is not fair because a machine cannot parse these things, and you cannot refer with a PID to a specific term. So we have started collaboration with the FAIR project.
Okay.
There is a work group, work package 4 is about FAIR interoperability and semantics. So we are migrating our dictionaries to this FAIR version. So we have PIDs, and this new ontology is now in Ontoportal, which is a prototype of FAIR vocabulary for this. And you can define mappings between all these different dictionaries. It's still in a test phase, and it will be published soon.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hopefully we can somehow stay in touch, but because it would be, since this is also chemistry data or data within the range of the scope of our working group, your experience would be very valuable, and maybe we can have another discussion on that, and also as a kind of a case for, you know, the improvements that you can achieve by adopting this, etc. Thank you.
Just looking at the chat, there were some other questions and comments. Heike asked, how did you decide what are the relevant metadata?
So I don't know if
maybe I can explain, no?
Yes, please, Heike, if you want to explain the question.
Yeah, so in the photoneutron science community, we also looked at the maturity model, and what we didn't look at all the indicators, but what we really tried to what we worked on was what are the relevant metadata in the reusable section. So what is really essential, important, and useful to have as metadata in the in our metadata, because first discussion is what do we need, like if you measure in the photoneutron science community, have a measurement and you don't state that there's what sample you're measuring, or you don't have calibration data, then you can't reuse these data sets. So I wonder if you had like similar discussions to decide what and also like categorizing metadata in your community in this essential, important, and useful.
So as I said, for for us, there is no real difference between metadata and data because, for example, if we take here I open the Zenodo version of the paper. So this is a remark of the paper. When you take the species database, for example, you have chemical information, which are scientific standalone data, because you have mass, you have INCHI keys, you have charge, molecular 3D molecular representation. So here is the remark 2 of the paper. Say one may object that the information contained into the species database, due to its scientific nature, should be considered as data. Nevertheless, we consider the content of species database metadata, since it is a synthetic view built from the chemical content of all the nodes. It is the consolidated, aggregated description of the chemical content. And data described in data are commonly considered metadata. So if we have an element which aggregate, which remix and present in a different way the information from somewhere else, we consider which is metadata, even if it can be a viable data by itself.
Yeah, but who told you that you have to name the INCHI?
Sorry?
Who told you that an INCHI or a chemical formula has to be somewhere? How did you come up with the idea that you might need a chemical formula or a sample? I mean, of course you need this, but I mean,
this is our standard. They are defined since 2009 when we built the infrastructure. We said we have to cross-match chemical data. So if I call it CO and you call it carbon monoxide, how can we say that we are talking about the same thing? So we have to find a lingua franca for chemical information. So we decided to adopt the INCHI and the INCHI key for machine actionable aspects. So it came from the practice to build interoperability between two different sources of data. We have to cross-match the data, so we have to have a reference in common. And all this is the same things for representation of atomic state. We have to define a common ground to describe the atomic states or the molecular states. So we have started defining all these standard representation, which are the core of the infrastructure, which is the XML schema, for example, for the representation of atomic and molecular states. And it's really something which was made because we have, at the beginning, it was 25 databases that have to cross-match the data. So we just sit around a big table and say, how do we do that? And we define standards for our community.
Okay, yeah. No, I mean, it's really some things are so normal. So how you say that? I mean, the maturity model classifies a license as essential, but this normal thing to have the INCHI number, or for us to have the sample there, this classification in this domain, there it stops, huh? Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Carlo. Yeah, it's great. I'm just checking what else there was in the chat.
Could I just summarize a little bit what we just heard? Because we're going to have some certain outcomes defined for this session. And Heike, it sounds like what you've just elucidated in this example is that there are discipline-specific qualifiers that potentially could be considered in, as you're navigating the model. And it sounds like you've got some really good use cases around defining data and metadata and what to include that might be useful for folks to realize for your type of research.
Yeah. Can I add something? I think there are all these attempts now to do these fair assessments and automated fair assessments and so on. And you try to decide if a data set is fair or how fair is a data set. But therefore some communities, there are certain information you need to be able to get. I don't say metadata or data, but that you really need to have available. And for certain things, it's a geolocation. For other things, it's a chemical formula. For us, it's a sample or something. And if you do this fair assessment, then it's like if it's not there, then you say, okay, you can't reuse these data sets. So these stops, these where everything, then you can forget the data set about this. And this is, I think, things these that have to be defined by each community.
Is there anybody here who's been working on the fair implementation profiles? I feel like Heike is talking about the value of that activity. Alex?
Yeah, I'm wondering if I should unmute him because I am in the World Fair project. However, I'm not part of the teams that are working on
But
the FIPS.
It's the point. The point she's making
Yeah.
is the value statement for the FIPS. Okay. All right. That it gives Keith and I something to think about as, okay, what do we do now with the fair data maturity model? You know, it's a good point.
Carlo, yes. You're muted, Carlo.
Sorry, just for saying that one of our big issues is that we have no data set. It's an infrastructure, we produce dynamically data. So we have no repository which is static. It's our dynamic databases which are upgraded and updated every day with new data, etc. And so we cannot refer to a data set. It's really something dynamic, and it's why we have really an issue in defining what is metadata and data.
So you were asking about the legal interoperability. They have I believe gone into maintenance or stood down, and maybe there's an argument for brushing off the dust and asking for them to tackle this question. I connected the dots because what are you licensing? Are you licensing the query? Are you licensing the dynamic data set? I think that's what you're getting at is, and how do we do it in an international?
And also is the issue because you are extracting data from a databases, which is somewhere with a legal framework, which is national, with a user, which is somewhere else with a different aspect, and is producing the data because it's ESQuery, which extract the data to format. So who is the owner of the data? The producer, the compiler, and also the data extractor may be seen as a pieces of the production because it's his query which is creating dynamically the data.
Thank you.
And at some point you say, just I'm sharing atomic data. I'm not a lawyer. So.
Thank you. That might be an opportunity for us to take a look at. Back over to you, Keith.
Yes, thanks, Carlo. That was really it was great to hear it in practice and seeing it used in practice, and also to see how complex it can get and all the different levels that are involved. And I think you have a very interesting use case in that you are indeed generating data on the fly. So that means the situation is a little different, and it's great to see that it still worked even in that context. So no, thank you very much, and thanks for those very illuminating insights. I really enjoyed that. I would like to move on to the next part of the session, and what I will do is I will get my slides up again, and this is where I would like to hand over to Shelley, here we go. You should be able to see my screen now. And yes, so this is a large and meaty and quite interesting topic, certainly a topic that's become of great interest to us as we develop the FAIR data maturity model, but also got questions around the FAIR data maturity model. So, Shelley, would you like to take this up and have a bit of introduce this article or open letter, and what we can do with this, where we might be able to take this?
Yes, I was asked to review this letter. It just so happens I knew too many of the authors for there was too much of a conflict of interest. But I did go ahead and do the review, and what was very exciting is the content from the authors included the FAIR data maturity model. So that piqued my interest for sure. But they approached a way for us to really use assessment tools with governance as a way to help our community normalize, standardize that the conversation we had earlier about subjective decisions. How do we reduce subjectiveness when we're trying to evaluate the many different types of data? And this is a common issue with assessment methodology outside the research space. If you think about the capability maturity model that's used for software development folks and other things, there is a level of being subjective. And one of the elements that's added into the training for those people who do assessments is giving them boundaries. Like, this is okay, this is not okay, and there's examples that are given. We're really early on in applying FAIR. I mean, even though it feels like we do this, this is something that we talk about, we have meetings on, we're still pretty early in what it means to be fair. The point that Carlos made earlier about we don't yet have solid FAIR vocabularies, solid FAIR dictionaries. We're getting there, we're not fully there. Researchers this is not something they want to get their arms around because it is still hard. So we're on that path strongly. So this paper came along, and Keith, I think I'm introducing Roman first before we have a discussion. Is that the intent? Okay, very good.
Yeah.
So many of our authors had conflicts for today's session, so we were incredibly happy that Roman is available to talk about the paper. Roman and I have worked together for a number of years, and he is a real advocate for applying the FAIR principles and really diving into what they truly mean, and bringing our communities with us to understand the value of that exercise and that practice. And Roman, I'm going to let you do the rest of your introduction and take it away from here. Do you need to share your screen?
I will share my screen later. Yes, just before sharing, I want just first introduce myself. Yes, my name is Roman David. My first name is Roman. My last name is David. And I'm working in European research infrastructure, working on highly pathogenic agents. So we are federating biosafety level 4 laboratories. But before I was working in oceanography and in agriculture, working on the interoperation of big experiments. And high throughput phenotyping, plant phenotyping, and large observatory system in oceanography. And now I'm after a work in the EARSC-LIFE project, that is a cluster project federating 35 projects around data and FAIR data and FAIR data sharing. I'm now working in the OSCAR project that has launched his first call on data sharing in the framework of EOSC. And in all these activities, I'm also involved in the EOS Task Force Fair Metrics and Data Quality, where I am in with Marie Clémola that is here. So Clémola, Marie, can you perhaps introduce yourself also, because you are also a co-author of this paper, and I guess that we will try to present it together.
So thank you, Romain. So my name is Mari Clémola. I'm from the Finnish Social Science Data Archive and CESTA ERIC and Tampere University. And I'm very happy that Romain has promised to present the paper, and really interested in hearing your views and the discussion. Thank you.
So I will share my screen just because, as I have no slides, because I was only yesterday aware that I had to present something. I will just show you where the paper is. It's on Open Research Europe. It's an open and free platform from the European Commission that permit to publish papers coming from, for instance, EOSC activities. You know that in EOSC we have several task forces that are around the building of the web of fair data. That is something that must concern all the world, not only Europe. But in this, we have a core of task force, around 10 task force, 11 exactly, and 3 of them are dedicated to the core technical aspects of fair data. And one of them is about fair metrics. The second one is semantic interoperability, and one is about PID policy and implementation that also have a link to governance. And in this paper, we are mixing lots of people that are and authors that are coming from several communities in all clusters of science in Europe, and we have tried to work on a way to continue building on things that are already existing in several forums. And the first one is the RDA with the FAIR principles that are principles. But the fact is that FAIR principles do not indicate how to implement them and how to understand them in a community or one other. For instance, in one community, people will understand a PID like a DOI for a data set, that's enough. But in others, if you do that, you lost lots of things, because data are always mixed with other, and you know it's terabyte per second that are arriving every time. So you must have something more robust. And when you evaluate that, it will not mean the same thing. In astronomy, for instance, when we talk about interoperability, if you don't have that, you can't compare your data with your other observers, but you are comparing the same thing. So interoperability is something crucial. And what is happening, because we have now the fair data maturity model that try to explain all the dimensions of each principles in a model, and that's a good advance. But something is missing, because if you talk about the level of understanding and the level of importance of this criteria, essential, or I don't know what is a good word, sorry, it's essential, useful, and so that's what I have forgotten, because there are others scale on the same, not words, but the same three scales, and I mix always them. So when you compare the interoperability in, for instance, astronomy, where you have the same kind of data related to the same object, so you need to know that this object for you is the same than for others, and the same vocabulary is working together for a long time. So for you, it's each interoperability criteria is essential. But if you try to do that in humanities, or for instance in life science, that is my case, you will have lots of discrepancies, because all communities use words for different things. And if you mix that with the multi-language aspects, it's worse. So how to apply that? And when and because FAIR principles are now in European Commission law and text, and they are implemented and they are chosen to be fundamental for next European projects. We need to have something that is comparable from one community to another. And when we tried in another paper, Apple to Apple, the Apple to Apple paper, to compare the metrics that you tried in several, you have several automatic tools that are already existing. We obtained very different notes. Even if it was by automatic assessment, we found notes from 5 to 15 under 20 points, for instance. So a very big discrepancy that was dependent on the type of metrics, on how you understand the metrics. For instance, if you have rich metadata, you can see in the FAIR metadata and maturity model, it's more detailed. It's metadata that are sufficient and they are adapted to the data. So for instance, a color, you have enough color and you are sure that the colors are the colors that are also in your data set. The problem is that when you change from one community or in the same community from one experiment to another, you will change the sufficiency of the data. It will not be sufficient at the same level. So one data will be fair for one experiment, but will not be fair for another. So the criterion can change at one level, and it is the same not only for metadata. Metadata, it's something like 15 of the 16 criteria in FAIR principles, but it's also the case for criteria that needs to be community approved. Lots of communities don't have a common validated vocabulary or ontology for a kind of data. That means that if you think that you are in the good way, perhaps you are not, because you are choosing something that is not useful for one of the people from in your community. So the evaluation of the FAIR principles, even if the future grant could depend on your note, is not very robust. That's the point, the starting point of the paper. So to try to begin the discussion, because we can't resolve things in one way, we have tried to summarize and to make a schema of the actual situation by classifying stakeholders in three main cases. The three main cases are here. It's the first group, it's FAIR practitioners, people that are with data in hand all days. FAIR custodians is kind of experts or people that are in repository or in task force of FAIRs, for instance, or in RDA, and they know what is really a unique identifier and how it can be applied in a community or in one another. And the FAIR decision and policymaker, people that will give the means and the money and the availability of time. And in each of these three groups, we tried to apply some use case. And after applying them and trying to, it was an exchange between experts, because it's heavy to do at this step, but it was a way to classify for each group, each stakeholder of each group. You have 10 subgroups of people, starting from researcher on a research performing organization, research software engineer, for instance, for the practitioner, to other groups. I will not detail all of them, I don't have the time. But in this paper, in these three groups, we had some way to be linked to the FAIR appliance and the FAIR démarche. And we have tried after for stakeholders to see what are the benefits for a fairness governance, something that could ameliorate the scalability and the harmonization of the nodes and of the evaluation process. Indeed, we have seen things that were presented at the beginning of this presentation. from Carlo, for instance, and from others by their remark, it's that with support, you will increase the understanding of the fair. And lots of people are not ready to do it in several cases, not only by the mean, but by the understanding of what it means really. And we have tried in this table, and that's, I guess, the core of the paper, to see what are the benefits and how we can try to harmonize in several steps a kind of governance body to do this together with all stakeholders. So for the models of governance, after we have compared all existing bodies at the international level, their function, how they work, and how it could be applied to a governance model for the FAIR principles appliance and the FAIR principle assessment, sorry. And indeed, all of them are not here, but from these examples, we had some key consideration of what could work and what could miss. And in the last part, we have proposed some possible doors to go further, and we open that to discussion. That's the core of this paper. So to find it, it's on Open Research Europe. Marie, you want to complete me?
Oh, thank you, Roman. I just wanted to add that we also did a fair survey that we sent, that was done by the task force, and there we asked about the fair assessment governance and if the community thinks that there's a need for such a governance body. And the responses, I mean, we didn't have that many respondents, and this was the survey was launched before this paper was out. But anyway, I think there were there was hesitance responses, and there was some need for this kind of governance, but then on the other hand, people also, the respondents felt that the money could be spent in a better way. I think that depends a lot on where you come from, and so, for example, people who had used the existing tools were more positive about such a governance, and I think there were something like 6 respondents who had very negative views on the governance, and they used the open-ended question to express their views as well, which we really appreciate. So I think this is an issue that needs a continued conversation, and what is the real need for the governance and how it can be managed, so that it's not something that will be overburdening or something that is not really needed by the community. So really happy to hear all views, and I will add the link to our report on the survey in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you both. Having worked with Keith and Edith on the Fair Data Maturity Model, there was one aspect that you leaned into, Mari, that I just want to call out like the elephant in the room, and that's the unintentional consequences of having a governance model and how that could impede or create barriers for researchers that we certainly don't want. And you call it out in your paper about the application of this, of governance, and making sure that it's to support researchers and not a pass-fail of some kind. And I just want to highlight that for everyone, that, those are also comments that Keith and Edith and I have received on how you implement a maturity model, because that is true. That is always true for maturity and assessment, and coming up with a number that doesn't tell the whole story. It just is a quick way for someone to say something. The takeaway I had when I was walking through the document, I appreciated that you had framed the document as a discussion, that you did not say that what was recommended was the only way. It was a beginning. And I really appreciated that. And it got my mind going in different ways. And one of them that was very motivational is we talk about research data as a first class or a primary research output. And the community, the broader community, struggles with what does that mean? And how do we implement a peer review like activity? Some communities have peer review for data, but it's not very often. Like it's well-funded groups have that. And I was seeing this governance model as a potential way to walk towards that representation for data sets to be peer reviewed, to have, okay, all right. So I'm going to pause. Now you know how excited I was about the paper and the opportunity for this discussion to continue, and grateful to for the work that was put in by the authors. And, you know, Carlos' talk coming before, I think you can see how he found value in using his own governance to apply and move towards a better infrastructure. And I think there's a real opportunity here. So would anybody like to jump in on this conversation? Roman, I did not get you on the phone after I finished reading the paper. I am remiss in having not told you how excited I was. I'm probably my schedule caused that issue, but I was quite delighted.
Yeah, the task force will be renewed soon. But I guess that main participants that were active will be in again. And we often, even if it's European task force, we often try to make links with RDI groups. That makes sense because we need to work together. And I am also aware that we invite people from outside to participate to work. So there are several ways to continue to work, to continue the discussion in another perimeter by including the task force.
That would be great to consider that. Keith was just we're a working group in maintenance, and we have been asking ourselves many times, you know, what should we do next? What conversation do we need? Adoption stories are always important. So having this paper, Carlos's talk, some folks who are not participating in today's sessions also have been doing adoption that we maybe can hear from later. You know, having those examples is really important. But this, you know, putting Carlos and Roman's presentation of the paper together is a really interesting use case, or two use cases around where the value is, where, you know, what was it, the summer of 22, where you just happen to feel the value. But the outcomes are really, you know, helps to reinforce where our time is needed, where, you know, we have a brand new RDA working group that stood up around vocabularies. I have to roll back. Wow. Gerard. So just really excited about that. Edith and Keith and I had hosted a conversation about vocabularies and the lament that they weren't ready yet. But they're getting there, and you're showing that is happening. Please. Please, Roman, go ahead.
Just to add two or three comments on what we have exchanged today. The first is that the complexity and the advancements between communities is not the same. But what we have tried to not conclude, but to draw in this paper is it's also that people need governance for support, at least for support. Because for them, they don't know how they can find the good way to understand and to develop, to implement their solutions. So for that, if you don't have somebody who said, hey, okay, I think that you will win some means and some time if you do that with this on this organization. So for this, we have in mind some tools like competence centers and data stewardship registry and networks. But that's tools that need also governance, and they will base their governance on fair aspects. So they need to reinforce the fair metrics. And for instance, just one example, we have talked about the reusability hard work. Reusability, if you want, and if you try to implement the provenance aspect of the data, it could be really, really, really hard in lots of communities, even if they try to do it, because it's the only way to make science reproducible. And we have seen in the past that reproducibility challenges are high, but we are not finished on this step. And the first tool for that is the semantic interoperability. What kind of vocabulary have I to use also to talk about my data and my metadata, if they are fair or not?
I would add on, and what Danny Kincaid and I work together on a number of projects, and I'm watching her ask like the very questions that you would want to stand up a competency center so that she has some place to ask these questions. And I mean, I want to clip the chat and just put it in a blog somewhere so other people can find this conversation, because I'll bet you she's not the only one asking these very questions. Go ahead, Danny.
So thank you, Shelley. I have questions, right? But those questions I feel are stemming from the interpretation challenges that we've all been discussing. So as I hear Romain talk about standing up a governance for support, my mind goes to, won't that support be subject to the same challenges of interpretation? Like now, the support and governance body will be giving out challenges, interpretations that are going to be either disciplinary or domain specific, or like it always seems like we keep coming back around to the interpretation and implementation challenges because they are principles, not standards and guidelines. And I'm always challenged by this. As we talk about, one speaker had said the comment on very rich metadata is necessary. And while I don't disagree with that in the least, we have legacy data that has, tomes of metadata associated with it, but it was least effort by the researcher, and maybe not exactly spot on for reuse to even say it's fair, but it would pass a metric because there's a lot of it, right? So I struggle with all of these devils in the details pieces, and yet as a repository manager, am compelled to demonstrate that we are endeavoring to be more fair. The hardest part about the governance is, Shelley, when you started talking about the unintended consequences, and not just for the researcher, but for the repositories who are endeavoring to be fair. But if such metrics are used, as a determination for funding or something like that, I see that as an unintended consequence.
It sure is. It sure is. Yeah.
If I may jump in, I think this all is related to the discussions also how we should actually use FAIR not to assess but to assist. And for example, I've done that in a project like EOS Nordic, where we worked with several repositories and we got pretty good results. And it was just this, although it was a really sort of basic level of fairness, but we were able to raise the level of fairness of the Nordic repositories. And what the repositories needed was, I think, encouragement and just guidance and somebody to ask questions and get some answers. So I really like the idea of this assistance.
I think that's a great perspective, assist over assess. I really appreciate that.
And I think that's worth saying very loudly. And Lindsay, I see your hand, but I just want to connect the dots between Heike's point about discipline-specific interpretation, discipline-specific application, and Danny, who is representing a discipline. And I feel like we have to give more authority, like, to you. Like, you should make these decisions. Like, this is not up in the ether. It should land in the disciplines. The disciplines should have to weigh in on what is the right answer for robust, what is the right answer for data versus metadata, what is, or I feel like that's the right way to do it. And Danny, this is connecting in to a lot of our conversations around discipline-specific data management. Like, how do we do that? And I think it's owned by that community. So I'm not for when Maman was walking through the different roles, for instance, fair, there it is, fair practitioner, fair custodian, and fair decision and policymaker. I think there's a discipline-specific piece there that we have to hang on to give it grounding. Oh, okay. Over to you, Lindsay.
Yeah, I just had a couple of things to touch on. Plus one to what Danny said with the discipline specific stuff. I actually have experience, and it took me 2.5 years to recurate legacy data that hadn't been shared because FAIR became this, excuse me, FAIR became this perfect is the enemy of good enough, you know what I mean? And so people began to just not share it because it became so overwhelming. And then you'd have to jump in and just triage things. And so I think no one ever says, is this fair enough? And we can get it out the door, and technology will help us improve that fair assessment. So having flexibility, because the technology even is changing too quickly to keep up. And then you add on, domain curation, disciplinary components to it too, and you're going to be 4 years behind already at that point. So that's a big challenge. And this, I'm also a co-chair of the Multi-Omics Integration Working Group, and this comes up a lot. I asked the question of like, why do we share this? And they're like, oh, because we're told we have to. I was like, yeah, but don't you think we could share more? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. So now people are starting to create their own methods, and that still sits in that domain space. So can you separate out subject agnostic fair assessment versus domain assessment? And oh, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to give you a shout out for that, because even though I sit in a disciplinary repository in oceanography, we struggle with the connections to omics communities and omics broadly, like star omics, and struggle with how to crack that nut, just what you're talking about. So kudos, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a good conversation, because I think that there's silently, I think, a community that sits there and is like, I'm just going to watch and wait. And maybe those are the ones that we should start integrating into the conversations. So yeah.
That's a really great recommendation. And Keith, I'm thinking of things for the next, we've done the pilot, and now it's time to do season 2 with new cast members.
So one thing I find really interesting in this discussion is it drives home, and it's not a surprise. I've already been looking at this and thinking about this. It drives home the need to have the clear, defined standards that are relevant for the the discipline or the research community you're operating in and that research context in which you're operating. But is it then more useful to apply the governance to those, the defining of the standards and the identifying of the standards and the capturing of the standards against which you assess versus the assessment process? So these are separate but related things. So I find the work on FIPS fascinating, and I would love to take a few research communities through that to see how that works out in practice and see where research communities can agree on what a fair implementation profile for that community looks like and capture that and make that reusable. And would it make sense then to apply the governance and the efforts more in the space of the defining of the standards and the identifying of the standards and agreeing at that level? Or does it make more sense to put the effort in governance into the assessment level, which is, I guess, one level on top of that?
And why not both? I feel like there's like an operation, like recommendations on how to operationalize, how to establish your governance, things to consider that we could help articulate, or someone could help articulate. I'm not saying it's going to be us, Keith. I'm not going to throw you under the bus, man. But then also just general fare for a data set or an infrastructure like Carlos has just done. Okay, not just, okay, that was a little while ago, but nonetheless, we just talked about. Yeah. And there's a precedent here for implementation of a maturity model. We can certainly leverage work that's happened and for what the different areas are to think about, but it's Mari's point about the comments that came back from the paper and that money could be better spent elsewhere is relevant here. Are we ready to implement a governance on something that we still have infrastructure gaps on? Maybe there's a minimal viable product. Maybe there's something very small that we could plant, as in gardening, and not spend a whole lot of money on, but everyone realizes that this is how we're going to get rid of or mitigate subjectivity. I didn't go look at the comments, Mari. They must have been hard to read. I can't believe somebody gave you a neg. I'm sorry, I was so excited about the report. Where did the negativity come from?
I think it's the word governance.
It's polarized.
A source of negativity. So,
and it was in context for the European Commission funding, right? Like somebody don't fund that, fund this. So probably maybe a little that.
I know, and maybe Romain, you can remember better, but when we were writing paper, we did discuss about the word governance and if we want to use that at all, but yeah.
Yeah, and if we try to use governance with sustainability also, so that's another way to consider it.
Yeah.
I think it is the right word for to cover it, and I think it is the best way to mitigate subjectivity. But yes, it is. It can be polarizing, absolutely. So, Shelley, would you like to wrap up the discussion?
Yeah,
and then because we've only got a few minutes to go, and then I'll quickly just do a shout out for further adoption stories, and then I think we're done.
Yes, thank you all. I don't think I could have imagined exactly how our conversation was going to go today, but I was very excited about our speakers and the topics, and really appreciate your thoughtful comments. I've saved the chat and we'll hang on to that. And thank you very much, Carlos. Thank you, Roman and Mari. Keith, thank you. And Edith, when you eventually watch the recording, it's not your time zone, so we understand. I hope you're proud of us. And we'll consider what the next steps are for the maturity model. And if any, please do join the group to watch the progress. If you have any adoption stories or considering taking a look at the maturity model as it applies to your repository, Danny Kincaid, that would be really fantastic if you could do that. And we will highlight your effort there. And over to you, Keith.
Yep, found it. Yes. So all I can do here is thank you, Carlo, for the fascinating application and describing and sharing all the lessons learned from that. And Romain and Marie, thank you very much for sharing your views and the article. It really raises interesting questions about the subjectivity and how we can best address the subjectivity around fair assessment and ensure that we and while doing that still make sure that I like Maria, I really like your comment that it's not just about assessing, but it's about assisting and growing the data capability in the sector. So thank you all. As Shelley pointed out, we are always looking for adoption stories. If you have adopted the Fair Data Maturity model or are planning to, please let us know, because it can be quite hard to track. And we're always interested in hearing adoption stories and sharing those stories and the lessons that have come out of those. So thank you all for your time, and look forward to seeing you at an event sometime, virtual or face-to-face soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for the session.